Hello, and welcome to Mega's Wisdom Now. Today, we're going to talk about Pratyahara. We are explaining in these videos the 8 limbs of harnessing, also known as yoga. We are harnessing human potential, and these are 8 stages that boil down most esoteric practices to certain fundamental basics anyone can apply, and we're trying to explain them in a simple manner, in a direct manner, but more importantly, in a distilled manner. The 5th limb of yoga, Pratyahara, I translate this as reverse engineering. Now, what are we reverse engineering? We are reverse engineering the relationship between our body, mind, and reality. We have gone through the preparation phase. We have gone through establishing our stance, our posture, which can be physical and or our attitude based on the previous. We have gone through working with our life force, expanding it, associating it with our attention. And this work with the life force has done something to our attention, as we shall see. Now, this isn't a very systematic process in the sense of, okay, I'm done with this, I'm moving into that, I can do the other. This is a process that's organic. So sometimes we take many steps forward, sometimes we go back, sometimes these things overlap. It is up to you. The point is to engage and not feel that it has to all be done quickly. Progress can be sensed here and quite easily, but initially it may appear like it's moving like the hour hand of a clock, but much slower even. Still, over time, you observe changes, and any little detail that you observe is something that needs to be noted because the feedback is reinforcing. The 5th limb of yoga is probably the most misunderstood of all limbs. We all know about the later 3, concentration, meditation, even samadhi. The people who are into such things, meditators, people who do hatha yoga. Energy work is also well known. The stance, of course, you do hatha yoga, it's mostly focusing on asanas and stances. Then, of course, there's the morality, which all spiritual traditions focus on. Then we have internal exercises, the internal alchemy portion, the immersion within, the introduction to our inner self. Now, I'm mixing all of these things up, but the 5th limb it's how we enter one of the most important practices, and that is meditation. But I don't think the explanations as to how to do meditation or what even meditation is are sufficient, or at least they confused me when I was looking at it. And then in the end you say, okay, mindfulness is meditation, concentration is meditation, all of this is meditation. But the 5th limb introduces a concept that can move you into meditation. If you can master it, you're on your way to a special state known as samadhi, where the object and the subject come into synthesis through the process of perception. All of these things become a continuum. And what you've known as yourself and what you've known as the world reorganize in awareness and become something far more living. Your internal conditioning becomes dissolved. Your action-reaction dynamic becomes different. The way that everything registers becomes different. My point is to describe a map as to how to get there in a way that you can creatively engage with it yourself. The 5th limb is known as Pratyahara. Prati is a prefix. It defines the word in terms of against, towards, to, at, near, back again, return, reversing, depending on the context. The prefix conveys the notion of feedback. It's not so much a reflection, it's like the same thing moving out and then moving back in. It comes back against itself. Now, the second term is ahara. The term conveys meanings of using, employing, procuring something, bringing it near, taking it. So you have a motion of an action that expresses whatever the prefix is. It's the action of the prefix. So it's reverse usage of something. And that's kind of, or reverse employment. But that sounds like quitting your job. So reverse engineering is a more colloquial term. It's a paraphrase, but it kind of conveys the point. We're not recreating something. We're not taking it apart and putting it back together. We are reverse engineering process. We are getting into a process and seeking the source of it. Where does it come from? So this refers, and it's a very vague notion. It's like, well, so what? What process? Well, if you look at and I will quote the verses here. There's only 2 verses. I'm going to add a third one before that I have also talked about in the last video. But this process refers to these functions known as indriyas. This is translated as faculties or functions of Indra. Indra is traditionally the Vedic Indian sky god. He was one of the main gods of the Vedic religion. Later, he kind of fell into disfavor, still there, but marginalized. So he was similar to the god Odin or Wotan, the gods Zeus or Jupiter. It's an Indo-European skyfather god. However, like Odin and like Zeus, this god personified something. It wasn't quite the mind. This personified the animating spirit, the breath of life, so to speak, that comes in and animates the mind, the perception, and everything we are, the consciousness. So in the human microcosm, Indra is the personification of your mental will, the animating spirit, not your identity, but what drives it, what gives it life. And so Indra was a god who would imbibe the elixir, soma, which was associated with a certain mushroom or fungus concoction that brought about altered states, high frequency states, so to speak, transcended experiences. So when Indra would imbibe this, all of a sudden the spirit would quicken and immortality would be perceived as a reality. And beyond that, Indra was envisioned to be full of eyes and also to have golden arms and to be a war god. So it's the mania, the mens, the passion of awareness that mobilizes you, mobilizes your creativity. It can mobilize violence. It can mobilize any ideal. It can mobilize love. All of these things are mobilized through what I would call the mental will, the inner passion, the spirit. So we need to know about these because it's the basis of what this reverse engineering is applied to. So these indriyas, this is how the animating spirit connects to the world. They are the functions of Indra. They are what Indra does. They are the faculties of action and the faculties of knowing. You have expressive faculties and you have impressive faculties, output and input. These 5 and 5, forming 10 faculties in total, are directed by an 11th faculty, which is mind, manas. Manas is also a term that is cognate with mania, manic, mind. It's not just, it's the mind that acts, that pieces reality together. It's the mind that perceives and organizes things. It's not just the mind, the intellect. It isn't the cognitive mind so much. It's not the identity consciousness. It's not the I am person. It's not the planner. It's not the genius. It is the basic mind that pieces together this inner simulation of an outer world coupled with an inner world, because our world isn't just a pure reflection of what's out there. It's a filtered saturation of what's out there. We absorb and we filter everything, and then we add to it with whatever's inside of us. So it's an amalgam, it's an alloy. And along with this, the mind also tells us to do things like we move. So expressions are called the senses of action. Speech, using the hands, grasping, whatever we do with our hands, playing the piano, writing, using the feet, locomotion, kicking, soccer, using the excretory organs. Of course, we know what we do with those, and using the genitals for reproductive and entertainment purposes. The senses of knowing are the input: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Usually, as far as I know, the interpretation of the Yoga Sutras is about the senses of knowing. So we internalize the senses, or we shut the senses off, or we look into the senses and just shut the world out. That's not what I am interpreting here, however. Pratyahara, or reverse engineering of these faculties, of these expressive senses like speech and impressive senses like seeing and hearing. This is a reverse engineering of what the senses do and our experience of that dynamic. So it goes down to the source, because this is the basis organic source of consciousness. This is our interface. This is how we don't just dive into the mind and go, okay, who am I? What am I? That's a concept. How can you possibly decondition yourself if you do not dive into the sense of being without the conditions? Well, the body does that. You go through biopsychic means, the body-mind, essentially. So these are organic. Your kinesthetic sense is organic. Your speech is organic. It's undeniable. Your movement, especially the down and dirty pelvic stuff. All of this is organic, and all of it, including the down and dirty pelvic stuff, can be reverse engineered into the true nature of its process. We're not shutting anything off here. We're reaching the true nature and reflecting the process into itself so we can harness it and purify it. And the purification is automatic. The very reverse engineering dynamic moves to purify. But most people would be better off starting. There's two different types of addressing here. For example, if you want to reverse engineer the kinesthetic sense, your motion, how your hands relate to everything, it's almost called karma yoga. Basically, the yoga, the harnessing of activity, of mobility. So you are engaged with the awareness or consciousness and energy of the motion itself in the raw without obsessing or even caring about what the doing is. You offer that. See, that's where the offering is. Karma yoga is offer the results or the fruits of your labors to the divine. Well, you're basically releasing all of that so you can pay attention to the source of it, to your own motivational dynamic, the sense of it, because it all boils down to the same thing in seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. And that's probably a little easier because when you tune into your hearing, for example, you're tuning into how you notice sound affecting you. It's not a descriptive thing. Oh, how do I notice sound affecting me? Well, it's this. No, you remove all those associative conceptual qualities. It's not an easy practice, and I'm going to get into specific things to do as a suggestion, as a guideline. But right now, it's important that we understand what it is, because it's far more than most say it is. It's only one aspect, these five senses and the five elements they deal with. All of these address different aspects of our relationship to the world, ourselves, and existence as a whole. Reverse engineering is applied to the faculties both of action and knowing. The process is the same for both. However, it's expressed differently if we want to boil it down to practices. And you can actually design your own practices here if you understand the process and get some examples of how to do it, which I shall provide in the next video. So this process is a gateway to understanding and practicing meditation, because meditation is not just stilling the mind. Meditation is gaining the sense of reverse engineering these indriyas, the 10 and the 10, in order to then reverse engineer the 11th one, the mind itself. And so you reverse engineer it down to its basic consciousness root. It's not a mindfulness or observation practice, as I said. And energy work, that's why I'm adding that 53rd verse, whereas the 54th and 55th are about reverse engineering or pratyahara or sensory internalization, however you want to call it specifically. And more importantly, the 54th describes it. The other one just says how important it is. But the 53rd connects us to the previous one, and it's about energy work, because energy work teaches us concentration. It teaches us how to pay attention, because energy is something that's easy to pay attention to, even though there's tremendous resistances and we have a lot to overcome in order to sustain that attention. So it's about tuning into the consciousness of our reality relationship, which includes the expressions, how we express into the world in 5 basic ways, and the impressions, how the world comes into us in 5 basic biologically organic ways. And the mind is the coordinator of all of this, and the mind is conditioned. So it needs to be deprogrammed. And the best way to deprogram it is to harness and master the very pathways that have led to its programming in the first place. Our regulated expression and our regulated and controlled and censored and altered, or whatever you want to say, repatterned impressions. So there are specialized practices for each one of these 10 faculties because they're different faculties. However, they're all based on the same concept of reverse engineering, turning the faculty in on itself in order to step away from the specifics of what it does and immerse yourself into the doing of it. What is the nature of the action that this does? Not the subject, not the object, but the dynamic of sensed mobilization. So you do need to have a sense of energy, of life force, because this is about mobilization. Also, consciousness is perceived through energy. Otherwise, it's like an infinite mirror effect. There's nothing tangible. It's there, but it's intangible. With a little bit of energy, it's like taking water and giving it a container so we can grasp it, or we can't relate to it as well. This isn't about convenience, of course. This is about taking something that we normally don't associate with in this manner and harnessing it and mastering it and then being able to navigate through it. So let's go directly into the verses. Now, the energy of sustained attention is something you gain through energy work. So that means once you start realizing you're able to sustain your attention, you're able to focus without tension or stressing when it's more or less effortless in the ideal, then you know you're succeeding in energy work. That means that life force cultivation leads to the ability to concentrate, which is here defined not concentrating into a full focus on your studies or watching something. This isn't like mental forcing. This is a relaxed localization of your attention because you have something to attend to that is natural and organic. Here we come to the crux verse. This is the important verse. Now, you can call this the employment of reversal. Patanjali talks about it as a general thing. The name doesn't really define what this is outside of what it does. So he says, look, this reverse engineering, this reversal employment, this feedback looping, it works like the sense process. So it works like these indriyas. It works like the five senses and the five expressions. Because as it works in this way, the disentangled personal sphere is the awareness field's reflection of one's own nature. You move through the senses and you reach their very source, whether they're expressive senses or impressive senses, and you realize that your sphere of experience, how you relate through these pathways, outgoing and incoming, this sphere of experience becomes disentangled from everything that's afflicting you. Things dissolve. All of a sudden, your pathways begin clearing. And they begin clearing because they have been clearing in a different way through the energy work that ideally somebody has been doing. So this is a very fundamental form of harnessing innate potential. And then you realize that you're reflecting through this because you're removing all of this garbage or this excess or whatever, this corruption, this conditioning, this programming. You're rewriting your own code without rewriting it. It's coming back to its own. You're calming the waves. You're letting everything settle. And in doing so, you experience your own awareness field, but it's the field of awareness. Your awareness of your environment, awareness of yourself, awareness of the body, awareness of the thoughts, awareness of the feelings, awareness of other people, all your relations. So the awareness field is the cumulative localization or just a concept that boils down to all your relations. And it gets disentangled. In other words, employing this reversal is a sense process internalization. We're internalizing, we're looking at the source, whether the expressive or impressive senses, of their dynamic, the action. In every experience, you have a subject, which is you, the one looking out, the object, which is the world, whatever's coming in, and the action, just like in phrases, subject, verb, object. Because we're moving toward the samadhi, the unitary experience, where the subject and object are in continuity, and they acquire singular nature almost. And this nature is a verb. This nature is the essence of the fusion of energy and consciousness together. And it's a verb. It's a standing wave type thing. Reversal does this. It focuses on your sense processes. The easiest way to explain it, because I will give examples with hearing, sight, everything else is similar, but there are two exercises with hearing and sight, and then we can expand it to the other ones. And then we can go into the external ones and say, well, here we have a sense that's like mindfulness, but it's more than mindfulness, because you go into the very essence of your mobility, of your speech, for example, doing mantras. So energy becomes the object here. The consciousness of you is the subject, and the action is the interplay between them, and you reverse everything into that relationship, and the relationship becomes singular. And finally, the 55th verse that culminates the second chapter of these sutras is very, very, very concise. It goes, consequently, when you master the sense processes, that's the supreme. That's the ultimate. Consider it a job well done because you have taken a massive step, and we are speaking of a transformation of sense action that is praised more than any other limb of yoga. At the same time, as I said, this is rarely given the attention it deserves because it's very hard to describe. Right now, I haven't told you anything about how to do it. I am telling you what it is. It leads to meditation, and to meditate on the mind, let's define it as the reverse engineering of the 11th faculty, the manas, the perceiving mind. Just like energy work, pranayama, breath work, breath leads to the perception of energy. The ongoing attention of energy and being able to move energy through mobilizing our attention is the reference frame for attention itself. You attend something, what does the attention do? It moves into the experience of this energy, this sensation. And so once you can do that, then you can attend to your senses. And eventually you realize, what do all these senses, these 10 senses, active and passive, have in common? They have in common the mind that directs and organizes them, the perceiving mind, the 11th faculty. I'm talking about a form of reverse engineering or employing the reversal of the mind. Why? Because we call meditation simply self-reflection. Instead of self-reflecting on the mind in this case, let's go back to the senses, to the faculties, the indriyas. We are self-reflecting on each of these. Let me self-reflect on what the hearing is, on what the sight is, on what my sense of touch is, what my sense of taste and smell are. When you can reverse engineer your relationship with the pathways that connect you to yourself and the world down to the essence, and you just keep your attention there and stimulate your life force while you're doing it, not only will your life force and your consciousness come together into a synthesis that makes up your newly awakened awareness field, but everything else is just going to begin falling away. And it'll begin falling away in a way almost that you don't have to do any effort with it. We can go back to our niyamas, to our original internalizations, go back to the 3 processes of harnessing that are fundamental: the internal passion, the flame, our aspirational awareness, which is focusing on the self, the best parts of self, the best aspirational whatever turns us on the most, what we look up to, all of these things, the keys to our motivational complex, our higher self. Then finally surrendering to the transcendent, the true transcendent, the God is love transcendent, known as Ishvara, when it comes through the individual reference frame. And eventually the point is to replace the so-called ego with Ishvara. Only Ishvara is conditioned through your experience remains. You don't just forget who you are or whatever and what you've done and what your preferences are. All that remains. Only your center of reference becomes real and living. It's not a program anymore. We replaced ourselves with doppelgangers. And this reality is so poignant, so strong, so influential that we have to use metaphors of actual death in order to even conceive how we can separate from it. That's it for this one. I'm going to let you ponder this and think about it because it is a very, very complicated topic, or it can be complicated. I've tried to simplify it as much as possible. Next time, we're going to dive into what it means in practice, or what it can mean in practice. So thank you for listening. If you are interested in this information, please subscribe by clicking on the icon at the bottom right of the image. Comments are always welcome and likes more than appreciated. Now, I've heard that subscribers often somehow get unsubscribed. YouTube unsubscribes you for no reason. So if you haven't gotten notifications, if you stumble on this, then check to see if you are subscribed, or maybe you have to resubscribe. I don't know. We're going to move through all of these 8 limbs, and then we're going to go point by point as if you are practicing. And any kind of complications and everything, any kind of things, because this topic is not easy. It's easy to convey if you're just doing it rote, or just saying whatever's been said before. You find a lot of the same copy-paste type of information out there. But when you have experience with it, there's a few nuances. And there are many who have experience with it. But then the conveyance of the language has kind of, something is missing somehow, and I'm speaking as someone who would listen to all of these things, all of these talks and all of this information. And it was always like, I couldn't get it. So yeah, you got to practice or apply it if you're going to get it. But how do you know if you're really applying it right? There is a process here of trial and error, warmer, colder, no, yes, no. And when you're doing it right, things flow better, but that takes a long time. So maybe we can contract that. Maybe you don't have to go like that. The world is changing, and many things that you hear in the collective sphere about bad things happening may be the intentions of some people, but true transformation is more allegorical than it is literal, because it's intangible and because we don't really move toward it unless we are maybe shaken a little bit. So that's the nature of the beast, and the program is not easy to release. So, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for the continuation of this topic because this is one of the most fundamental. If you're going to understand meditation, you need to understand this. If you're going to practice true meditation, you need to have some experience here. You don't have to master all of the 10 senses because you can focus on one and it'll tune you into, they all lead to the mind, and from the mind you can move into the self. Thanks once again. Make us out.